Mayor Stoney, I do want to circle back to this issue of the protests and how, as mayor, do you balance free speech rights with public safety and civil discourse? Because that's really got to be hard. Can you guys walk us through what the key is to because you've all had some version of this.
Yes.
What the key is to finding that sweet spot, right? Because I'm a free speech absolutist, but that sort of ends for me when you're chanting "We are Hamas, death to the infidels" or whatever the chants are, right? So tell me how you handle this as the chief executive.
Well, here in Richmond, I feel like we are the front stage for the state. If you want to protest, you don't go to Norfolk, you don't go to Arlington, you don't go to Alexandria, you come to Richmond, you come to the state capitol. And I've experienced this for most of my term, whether it was these sort of neo-Confederates coming down to voice their support of Confederate monuments.
Mm-hmm.
Dealt with 2020 as well after the murder of George Floyd. And now we're dealing with the pro-Palestine, the Hamas-Israel war protests as well. And for me, we have to obviously, we know that free speech is the cornerstone of our democracy. And I want folks to go out there and voice their free speech. However, there are also rules and laws to some of this, and the rule of order must prevail. And if you are trespassing, if you are obstructing the streets, if you are yelling obscenities at individuals, that's a problem. And you have to find that balance of protecting speech, but also protecting others as well. When you start to impede on other people's rights, right? I told someone the other day, if I told you like this is my property, you're good if you're just sitting here. But when you start constructing forts and tents, and I tell you repetitively, like, hey, you can't do this. Hey, you can't do this. And then finally, when I call the cops, the police show up, then you're like, what's going on? Why did you call the police? Well, I told you were breaking the law. So there has to be that balance. I'm sure the mayors on the call have all experienced it. And, I stepped out in front in 2020 in front of a crowd of a couple thousand people, thousands. Mm-hmm. And, I was yelled all types of names and whatnot. And it was my attempt to meet these protesters. Some of them were residents, some of them were not, but meet them where they are and tell them like, hey, I hear you, but there's a process to this as well, right? I'm not going to jump out here and just give people red meat because they think it's going to calm the crowd down. I'm going to tell you the facts about what we're dealing with. There's a process, and you know what? We're going to try and be as open and transparent about the process as possible.
It also is a little more art than science. You really have to feel it and monitor it and stay close to it because protests have rhythms and energy. During one of the protests we had, it was an 18-wheel truck and it got surrounded by hundreds of individuals and they started rocking it and they were about to turn it over, and I was in the command center. And I remember going to that truck because it was reminiscent of Reginald Denny during the Rodney King riots. And I felt like if they had turned that truck over, then it was going to become something else. And I've literally, against the advice of my chief and detail, went directly to the truck and told them to get off the truck. You have to follow it and feel it. I think when you're dealing with it at its best, because you can't just take a global view. Certainly, when being in Atlanta, the cradle of the civil rights movement, you have to have extraordinary sensitivity. But you know how I am about foolishness.
We've heard
there's a conversion in the foolishness that I think has to be met pretty strongly.
So Larry, when you talk about, so Mayor Stoney said, where are you going to go in Virginia? You're going to Richmond. Atlanta, birthplace of the civil rights movement. Philadelphia. We wrote it.
Yeah, birthplace of the nation.
It was written here.
Yeah.
Birthplace of freedom, liberty, and democracy, right? free speech, First Amendment. I'm a strong First Amendment person, but I'm not going to argue with my friends on here. I'm not going to try to cite chapter and verse, but there's also time, manner, and place
Mm.
in the law.
I love
And
the way
so-
he did that. Look at Michael Nutter. That was good. Do that again. I mean, he went jazz on us. You know what I mean?
Time, manner, and place. So, but what we're seeing, especially on these college campuses, and I'm of course involved with a couple different universities. I'm not talking about any of them in particular, but this is now a case study, in my view, on the balancing of rights and whose rights, right? My right to express myself can't interfere with someone else's rights to be able to do the things that they would normally want to do, right? Everybody wants to be on the same piece of ground, right? We often call public safety or the police department to provide that separation. In Philly, and Mayor Reed will remember, we had Occupy, we had, we can go from Trayvon Martin to Eric Gardner to Michael Brown. So many, too numerous to name. And then we were out of office for George Floyd, his murder. We saw it, but Chuck Ramsey, our police commissioner, we told people you can march all day and all night. We'll have police in front of you. We'll have police to the side. We had specially trained officers. These officers are protecting people and their right to free speech while they are yelling at the police. The level of profanity and language that none of us would ever really want to deal with. The moment you move to violence or destruction, that is not protesting. That's violence and destruction. And so that's a different response. And so that's a part of the balance. Mayor Reed said it well. You also do have to feel it. There came a point with Occupy, which was right on City Hall Plaza, where it didn't feel safe anymore. It didn't feel like it was what it was. And you know why? Because this is what's also happening on these college campuses. They become infiltrated.
That's correct.
By professional activists, some even possibly anarchists and disruptors who take over or provide a different kind of leadership than the students might normally do. And then people get caught up in a groupthink. And the next thing you know, they're wrapped up in something that they don't even know what's going on.